Page 106. Page 106. Okay. Good morning, Boker Tov, everybody, good morning. Parshat Chaye Sarah. And I always like to point out, I mentioned before,
What is Chaye?
Chaye means the life of Sarah. Okay? So there are two Parshiot which have in their name the word Chai, life. There is Chaye Sarah, and the very last Parsha in Bereshit is Parshat Vayechi. Okay? Vayechi deals with the death of Yaakov, and Chaye Sarah deals with the death of Sarah. So the question we would ask is, why in the world would the two Parshiot that deal with death, why would they be titled with the word Chaye, Vayechi Chai? Why do they have the word life in the title, the two that deal with death?
Celebrate their life.
Okay, so you want to say celebrate their life. Okay, Linda?
Because they're going on to another life.
Okay, good. Right? From a Jewish point of view, and we're going to see this very clearly when we come to Avraham's reaction to Sarah's death. A cemetery is referred to Beit HaChayim. It's either called the Beit HaChayim, the house of the living. It's called the Beit Almin, the house of the world. And the Torah understands, teaches that life, there's the physical life, and then we have the transition over the Gesher HaChayim, over the bridge of life. And the Gesher HaChayim, the bridge of life, is what connects our physical, temporal life to our eternal life. Now, what we speak about when we talk about Olam Haba and Gan Eden, that is what's normally referred to when we speak about Olam Haba. That actually, the world to come, that actually is the Olam HaNishamot. That is the world of the souls, which is an interim stage before there will be this reuniting of body and soul. And that's what is discussed in the second blessing of the Shemona Esrei of the Amidah, which is Tchiyat HaMeitim. But life, as we know it, is, I wouldn't call it stage one, right? But it is a stage. And the Torah, this comes up in so many ways. Right? The Mishnah in the Tractate of Mako tells us that a Beit Din that would kill once in 7 years or once in 70 years was considered murderous, trigger happy. Right? However, there were times that there was capital punishment. And it's very interesting. You know, when someone takes a little cup of wine or schnapps, they make a l'chaim. Right? We make a l'chaim. Why do we say l'chaim? So, I'm sorry? V'lo l'mavet. Yeah. Because the Gemara Sanhedrin says that before the capital punishment, a person would make kiddush. What is kiddush? Sanctification. The person was preparing themselves for the next world, the next stage. And when a person would make that kiddush, people would say to them, l'mavet. Right? L'mavet, which means to death. So therefore when we take a cup of wine, we say l'chaim. But the idea of the capital punishment is not like capital punishment in a secular society where it is punishment or it is in order to dissuade such behavior in the future, or it's an economic consideration of the cost of keeping this person in prison for 50, 60, 70 years, but rather it is all part of a process of a teshuva, a very stark process of getting a person to the next stage. Okay, so Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah. Let's begin, and let's see what we can glean over here. Now, of course, the previous parsha ended with the saga of Isaac and the Akedah. Okay, so Isaac had just about, he was up on the altar, on the verge of being killed by his father Avraham. Avraham was told to stop, and that he was never meant to sacrifice, he was meant to bring him up onto the altar, and this was a testimony to Avraham's had this unbridled love for God, and then this was testimony and Avraham's realization of the complete awe that we are meant to have of God, meaning that we have no clue, no understanding of God and of God's world, and it's not, we can advocate as he did in the case of Sodom and Gomorrah when God opened the door for advocacy, and when there is a command, so then a person follows the command even when it goes against everything, right? What would Avram have been sacrificing along with Yitzchak?
The promises of Hashem.
The promises of God. What else would he have been sacrificing?
Probably his relationship with his wife, who wouldn't speak to him.
I would imagine, right? You did what? Right? I mean, this would not speak much for future shalom bayit, right? Between a husband and wife. So he's sacrificing God's promises, sacrificing relationship with his wife,
Next generation, a continuation.
sacrificing any continuity of who he was and what was he about.
And the promise that God said that...
Good. Sacrificing the God's promises.
And the belief in one God, because the community will say, you did what?
Good. Sacrificing all that he had accomplished, all that he had dedicated his life towards, which was the teaching of a kind, loving God. And for me, there's another thing that's, I think that's at the top of the list almost, that he's sacrificing. Besides obviously sacrificing Yitzchak.
Supposed to be like just...
His own faith.
His own faith.
Yeah.
His relationship with God.
Yeah. How can you have a relationship with God after?
How do you have a relationship with God afterwards? And that is the... And that was this challenge of Avraham, which was so transformative, of giving up everything. And giving up everything. He already had Lech Lecha, that he left everything behind to go to God, but now he's leaving everything behind. And that can only be done if a person says, I am absolutely and completely out of my league, right? That I can't, I have no idea, good morning, Jordan, that I have no clue who, what, where, and I understand there is this God, and I could try to understand him, but it's just completely beyond. Sarah's death is linked to the Akedah. So let's begin on page 106. Song for us in Hebrew,
Can I?
please.
ויהיו חיי שרה 100 שנה ו20 שנה ו7 שנים שני חיי שרה. ותמת שרה בקריית ארבע היא בחברון בארץ כנען ויבוא אברהם לספות לשרה ולבכותה.
Good. Two more. Vayakam.
ויקם אברהם מעל פני מיתו וידבר על בני חת לאמור. גר ותושב אנוכי עמכם, תנו לי אחוזת קבר עמכם, וכפרה מתי מלפניי.
Beautiful. Stu, want to give us from the top there?
Sure. Sarah's lifetime was 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. The years of Sarah's life. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to eulogize Sarah and to bewail her. Abraham rose up from the presence of his dead and spoke to the children of Heth, saying, I am an alien and a resident among you. Grant me an estate for a burial site with you, that I may bury my dead from before me.
Okay. So the first pasuk,
I'm lost.
yeah. Okay, so Sarah's lifetime was 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years, right? And Rashi brings an explanation why it lists the years of each of them. Why didn't it say 127 years? Why did it say 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years? The years of Sarah's life, right? Which seems to be talking about in a circle, right? Sarah's lifetime was 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, the years of Sarah's life, right? Those last words, the years of Sarah's life, are very strange and extra. Rashi says something which is astounding. Rashi says, Kulan shavin litova. They were all equal in their goodness. Now, let's look back on the good life of Sarah. Let's hear some examples of the good life of Sarah.
She didn't have such a good life from the story.
Let's hear some examples of the good life of Sarah.
She couldn't have children.
Couldn't have children until the age of 90.
Twice her husband is letting her get in harm's way. saving
Okay,
himself.
twice the husband says, meet my sister.
Yeah.
And then the king says, well, you have a very pretty sister. She'll come with us. Right? So twice she is subjected to that. What else?
Is it that her life was good or that she was good
She was
in her
good.
life?
Okay, so let's come to that in a minute. Let's come to that in a minute. That's an interesting, right?
Yeah.
But what are the good things we have with Sarah? So childless
You
for
mean
90
Beth?
years, right? And then being taken captive by 2 different kings.
And then the lady that's like her handmaiden. is
Okay.
nasty and terrible with
Okay,
her.
she can't have a child, but the handmaiden, right? She gives the handmaiden as a wife to her husband. Next thing you know, this the first surrogate, and next thing you know, right? She's got she has a child from Avraham, right? This was a tough life. This was a very tough life. Not what we would call, a shavin litova. So the simple meaning is kulan. They were all shavin. All the years were shavin, were equal litova, and they're good. So Laura, what did you want to say?
So I always interpreted it not that she led such a good life, but in this life of many challenges, that she was equally good at every stage of her life, from a little girl to there's 7, there's 100, there's what else? There's 3, right? But
Yeah.
then in each of those stages of her life, that she was equally.
That's an interesting approach. That she stayed steady throughout.
She accepted whatever events came into her life.
Okay.
No,
And,
that was
Okay.
the last moment.
You know, I thought that was so.
Yeah.
I find it this whole thing, this beginning chapter with Abraham and with Sarah. To me, it's a model for us all, because we all live in stages. We all have stages, and each stage could be good and not good. And one stage is a promise of the next stage. The next stage doesn't fulfill the promise, or the next stage does fulfill the promise. It seems to me it's an abbreviation of everyone's life, and Sarah exemplifies perhaps a woman's life, and Avraham exemplifies a man's life or a Jew's life, whatever. And to me, that's what this is. This whole section is what life is about. It isn't fantasy. It isn't always happy, joy. It's not a fairy tale. It's real trouble sometimes, and it's real blessings other times. And the blessings may come later when we don't expect it,
Mm-hmm.
and difficulties may come when
Beautiful,
we don't expect it.
beautiful point, and beautifully said. Yeah, yeah. And I think even the simple explanation, right? They were all shovin litova. You know, if we are to look at the gift of life, at the gifts that we have in life, every moment, right? So we, you know, my arm is hurting. I have an arm, right? The AC isn't working. Key point in my house, right? And when we just look at all the things that we have, and perhaps it's because Sarah, with all of that she went through, as Chai Rivka said, that that is part and parcel of life that we have. There's the good times and there are the hard times. There's the laughter and there are the tears, and that's what makes up life. But when we add it all up, I want to live. Life is a gift, and not only do I want to live in life as a gift, but I appreciate the life that I have, the blessings, and the challenges. The famous thing: if everyone's going to take all of their sorrow, all of their problems, and write it down on a piece of paper and put it in a bag in the middle of the table, right? And everyone's got to take one bag. Everyone takes their own bag, because that is what is tailored. That is what suits us. And Sarah had this perspective to view life like that, to keep that level-headedness. I might mention before. We spoke about the Akedah very briefly. How about Yitzchak? Right? Often Yitzchak is depicted as this little boy being taken by his father. Actually, how old is Dad?
70.
How old is Dad? 100 and something. Right? Yitzchak actually is, yes, a man in his 30s.
38.
Yeah. So, it's not the picture of big dad taking poor little boy, right? It is strapping, healthy boy with aged dad, right? And Yitzchak is going along with it. Yitzchak is going along. Isaac is going along with it. And I think it goes back to what we said before about Avraham, but it goes even further, right? Yitzchak is all about din, right? We say the attribute of Avraham is chesed, is kindness. The attribute of Yitzchak is din, is judgment. Now, and what does his name represent? What does his name mean? Laughter. Laughter. Now, imagine you walk into a court and you sit down. Right? I mean, laughter and judgment don't really go together. But actually, well, it's interesting. Why do we laugh? What makes us laugh?
Nervousness.
It could be nervousness. It could be joy. Surprise.
Yeah, surprise punchline. That's
Yeah.
the best jokes, right?
Yeah.
You really laugh because you weren't expecting it.
Yeah. This is not where we're expecting this to go. Even the terrible laughter of seeing someone trip, and the more dignified the person, the funnier it seems it's the incongruity. It's the incongruity that we just, it might not be funny, but now din, judgment, means a clear ability to see incongruity, to see what's not fitting together, what's not lining up. Now, Yitzchak's life was filled with incongruity, right? He was born when his dad was 100 and his mother was 90. His whole life didn't make sense. And the truth is, if we're looking at it from a vantage point of din, no one's life makes sense. Before I was born, what din argument can I make for myself? Why was I born? Why do I deserve to be born? Why does anyone deserve to be born? Based on din? None of it makes sense. Life doesn't make sense. What claim can I make that I deserve to be born? What have I done? At that point, nothing. So Yitzchak had this sense of din that allowed him to go to the Akedah. I like to compare it when a kid is up past bedtime. So you let him stay up, let him stay up. Right? They start, can I have this? Can I have that? But I want this. Like, whoa, gig's over. The gig's over. Right? You are on borrowed time. As long as you're going nicely and quietly, okay, we'll let you stay up a little bit longer. But you're on borrowed time. And, I want this, Why? Oh boy, it's really late. Time to go to sleep. Come, let's go say Shema. At that point, the gig's over. Yitzchak, from a din point of view, understood that every moment of life was past bedtime. It was not something that I can demand, that I deserve. So now, the gig's up. Time is up. He'll go along with Avraham. Sarah, that same perspective. Shnei Chaye Sarah. Whatever I have, if I'm alive, it is a blessing. It is an unearned, undeserved blessing. Rashi brings that what led to this is Sarah was hearing. Rashi asks, what is the connection between the death of Sarah and Akedah? So Rashi brings from the Medrash, the two of them were closely linked. In what way? She heard about the Akedah. She heard what was happening. She heard that her son was nizdamen b'na l'shchita, that her son was being brought to be slaughtered. It kimat shelo nishchat. Right? And he was about to be slaughtered, and either she heard he was about to be slaughtered and he didn't, but she got so worked up from hearing this, from this report, that she died. Parcha nishmata minena v'meita. Or kimat shelo nishchat. She was about to hear, and he wasn't slaughtered, but she didn't get to that point. She died. So here we've got the fallout from the Akedah. The fallout from the Akedah is the tragic death of Sarah. Yitzchak may have lived, Sarah did not. Sarah did not. Now, we read that Avraham came to eulogize Sarah and to cry for her. What's strange about that? He came to eulogize and to cry for her.
That's reversed.
Okay, normally when there's a death, right? You cry when you hear about the death, right? And then at a later point, what does a person do? They eulogize. They'll speak about the person. Here the order is reversed. Avram came to eulogize Sarah and to cry for her. Furthermore, if you look in the Hebrew, on the third line, second to last word on the line, the word veliv kota, right? It is a 6-lettered word. You'll see the fourth letter the kaf is small. It's a kaf ze'ira, it's called. And actually in the Torah itself, that kaf is written small. I believe the Balaturim explains the reason why the kaf is small is because the crying was somewhat contained, somewhat limited. Why would the crying be contained and limited? This is 127 years, right? We know this, we experience this. The person dies at the end of a long life, so there's sadness, there's tears, there's not a sense of tragedy. There's a sense of the cycle of life, of the inevitable cycle of life. Sadness, tears, 100%. But there's not anguish. There's not a sense of anguish. So the Balaturim says that Avraham, his cries were somewhat muted. They were tempered. Because there wasn't anguish. There was sadness. The sadness of a life partner. Right? And a life partner of sharing a mission, of building this nation. But it was somewhat muted. That's how the Balaturim explains this. Yes, though.
Quickly, in the very, very beginning, talks about exactly this is how many years your life for Sarah. Meaning that.
Good. Let's come around to that. Good. Good. So, why? She lived a good long life, a full life, a productive life. Why would her death come about in such a tragic way, according to the Medrash Rashi brings, in such a tragic way that she heard about the Akedah, and that somehow brought on her death?
He was guilty partially. Abraham was guilty that she died.
So you want to say that Avraham was guilty?
Abraham was guilty, of course.
Who? I'm sorry?
Avraham was.
What do you mean?
Guilty.
Felt guilty.
Felt guilty, and he lost his life partner. For him, it's a tragedy. Maybe for someone else, it's sadness, but for him, it's a tragedy.
Okay.
Though he had other wives.
Okay.
Had millions of children. All the Arabs came from that.
Well,
And
yeah.
the same Parsha, he married Keturah, he had Pilagshim.
Yeah.
So he wasn't that sad and he didn't think it's the end of his life.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree that a person marrying afterwards is an indication
Well, he got back
of a lack of sadness. I don't agree with that at all. I look at my father, Zichron Levrach.
No, I don't
Right?
say
No. I'm just saying of a person who loved his wife tremendously, and then years afterwards remarried and had a very wonderful relationship.
But he took the wife, he took Agar because according to the commentaries, Keturah is Agar.
Right.
So it's not like he met somebody.
Yeah.
So
that was an existing. Yeah. I don't see any complaint against Avraham. I don't see any complaint against Avraham. Leah.
I think when we judge Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, we think of them like us. I mean, they're not perfect, so they made mistakes, but I don't think they like us. So, when Sarah didn't think, Abraham was going to kill my son. I think she saw the purity, and I don't know, she was a prophet. So she saw that he obeyed Hashem. And if that's what Hashem asked for, then why would she be upset?
Granted.
So
You're making a good point. If Sarah was greater in prophecy than Avraham, so why was he able to resolutely go forward and do this, and with her neshama, her soul flew out from her.
Or maybe
A possibility could be, keep in mind that when God spoke to Avraham, it was very gently and it was in stages. Take your son, your only son, that you love, Yitzchak. And the sages fill in, right, that this was slowly, take your son. Oh, I've got more than one son that you love. Your only son. Oh, well, this one's the only son to his mother, this one's only son to his mother. That you love. I love both my boys. So it was a gradual acclamation that was given to Avraham. It wasn't this suddenness. And that's a concept that we see throughout. The Gemara, the Talmud says, right, Kachi Darkshi Yitzhahara. This is the way of the evil inclination. Hayom Amalecha say Kach, Hayom Amalecha say Kach, Uvesof Amalecha Lech Avodah Avodah Zarah. Today he says to you, do this. Next day he says, do that. In the end, it's go do Avodah Zarah, right? Go worship idols, right? It's gradual. Yet we find Har Sinai, right, turns into Chet HaEgel, right? So where's the gradual descent? Here you went from Igra Ramah Labira. You went from this high. You went from this high level, came crashing down. And I think Chaim Shmulevitz says that when you're in a state of shock, when you're off balance, then what can happen? Could be a precipitous drop like that. And I think by Sarah, right, this came out of left field. And right, you're making an interesting point, Leah. And we do need to, on one hand, we do need to recognize the greatness, right? At the same time, we do need to learn. We do need to learn from them.
Also, is this an emphasis to get Yitzhak married?
Okay, I hear that.
The fact that Yitzhak lived it meant that all the promises still could come true. So Abraham had a different view than Sarah, because Sarah imagined, in a sense, because she was not there and she didn't speak to him, and she just I don't know if a prophetess imagines, but she wasn't there, so she could conjure up possibilities. But he was there. He was there. That meant that he realized that God was not letting him down, and all the promises we talked about
would somehow
still come true.
Somehow,
and
yeah.
so he could move on. He could move on with assurance. To
Okay.
be married,
I
to
hear.
build, all this, because God did not let him down.
Good.
Right?
The Nesiva Shalom has a very fascinating approach here. Can a person ever lose the reward or the gains of a mitzvah that was done? So on one hand, we'd say no, but there always needs to be the balance. There always is this symmetry. Can a person erase sin? Yes. What do we call that? Teshuvah, repentance. So if a person can erase sin, then a person can also somehow erase a mitzvah. Okay? I'm sorry?
If you do enough averot, then you...
Well, I would disagree with that. If I do enough sins, so okay, I've done a lot of sins, but that won't erase my mitzvot. The same way that doing a lot of mitzvot doesn't erase my aveira. Right? Doing a lot of mitzvot doesn't erase my sin. Doing a lot of sins doesn't erase my mitzvah. Well, what does erase my sin?
Regret.
Regret.
Right.
Regret. Right? Regret means I'm going back, I'm revisiting, and I'm saying I should have taken a different path, and I'm feeling the pain over what I did. So the Gemara says, similarly, regret is what can erase A mitzvah. Now, we've discussed before, I've said this a number of times, but it bears repeating. So a person might say, why would I ever regret doing a mitzvah? That doesn't make sense, Rabbi. Who would ever regret doing a mitzvah? But then, I think we look at ourselves, right? We go out of our way to help someone, and we're not thanked, and we're not appreciated, or that person then, refuses to reciprocate. So very often our feeling would be, I wish I never should have helped the person in the first, right? So it's not so far gone that we could regret having done a mitzvah.
5 minutes turns out to be 3 days. You thought, this mitzvah is only 5 minutes. I could do that.
Okay? Yeah, it can happen. Right? So now,
She's saying maybe Sarah regrets what she did to Hagar.
yeah.
What did she do anything wrong to Hagar?
According to Ramban, she acted too harshly, sending out Hagar. And Ramban says that the tzarot that we're reading about daily between the descendants of Hagar and Yishmael and the descendants of Yitzchak all trace their way back to that.
Just like Erechzina?
No one was a perfect person. Avraham also made mistakes, right? And and I think it's the imperfections that let us really see that this is a person, right? No, there's not been a perfect person. There has not been a perfect person. Right? All attendees here aside, there's not been a perfect person. Yes.
I was just going to say that Hagar also wasn't so perfect either.
100%.
And I think that what she did, I mean,
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like beyond anything
Granted.
that Sarah did.
Granted. Let's come back over here. Let's come back over here.
To be on a higher moral ground than Hagar. More is the
Sarah was a prophet. In
Hi, good
my
morning. Are you
part-
Lillian? Hi,
in my
Lillian.
part, if
Nice
Sarah-
to meet you.
If Sarah was a prophet, Rabbi, and believed in God, how can she have asked Avraham to take Hagar, to take a concubine, if she, that's,
Different
Yeah.
times, different
This was
customs.
before, well,
Right, that's
Yeah.
what they are called.
It's a whole. That's a whole different. It ended up being pretty ill-advised. Granted, but that's a whole different.
But with Yaakov,
yeah.
it ended up good. He
Yeah.
had very good
Yeah. That's I don't want to wade into that because.
There's a lot of problems.
Yes.
stick with one
Okay.
part at a time.
But let's come back over here. Okay? So we established a person does something wrong. The way that can be erased, so to speak, is the process we call teshuvah, repentance, and that is based mostly upon regret. A person can do a good deed, and the only way that can be erased would also, in a similar vein, be through regret. I regret ever having done that good thing. I'm sorry?
Is that the reference to Nesiva Shalom?
No. That's the Gemara Kedushin.
Okay.
That's the Gemara Kedushin. Now, Nesiva Shalom says as follows. Abraham had the great challenge of the Akedah, of the binding of Isaac. And he stood up to that test. The test isn't over yet. The test is not yet over. What then happens? Sarah's death seems to be linked to that episode, to that Akedah, to that binding of Isaac. Sarah's death seems to have been a result of that. So now Avram has the Akedah part B, the binding of Isaac part B challenge. What is that challenge?
Continue believing in Hashem. Even
To
though
continue
Hashem did
believing in
that.
Hashem and not to regret. What could he have so easily have said? You know, I'm so glad that, you know, very often we might say, I'm so glad I did this act. It was a good act. But look what it led to. And to have at least a certain feeling inside of, I wish I hadn't. The challenge now facing Abraham is, I did the right thing, but look what resulted. Do I regret having done it or not? And the way that Avraham does not regret is based on a very important understanding of life and death. And the point when death arrives. The mistaken glimpse, the mistaken perspective is, look what happened. Sarah heard about this almost death of Isaac, and she died. That's what caused her to die. Had I not done that whole binding of Isaac, then Sarah would still be alive right now.
But who can say that?
Maybe.
That would be the cause of his regret. My actions caused that. Had I not done that, it would have been changed. She would still be alive. Therefore, I regret. Just 1 second. That was not Avram's view. And that's what the Pasuk. Let's go back to these verses again on page 106 and 107. Lillian, do you have a good. So on 107 we have it over there in English. And it was Chaye Sarah, the lifetime of Sarah was 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. Those were the years of the life of Sarah. Now, let's take away the different explanations we gave before. 100 was like 20, 20 was like 7, and all the years were good. Let's just read that. And what does this pasuk seem to be emphasizing? What does this pasuk seem to be driving home? And it was the lifetime, the years of Sarah were 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. Those were the years of Sarah's life. What does this pasuk seem to be driving clearly? What point is it clearly driving? These were the years of Sarah. These were the years that she was meant to live. Sarah was meant to live 127 years. That's exactly how long she was meant to live. What caused the death of Sarah? Careful.
Hashem took her.
The 127 years.
Was there time anyway?
Time to go.
Time had come. That is what caused the end of the life of Sarah. Was it what Avram did by the Akedah, by the binding of Isaac, and he heard that, and she heard that, and therefore, and how many times do we beat ourselves up? If only I would have done something. 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. That's the life of Sarah. The years of the life of Sarah. Period. Avraham, so to speak, did not take the bait, overcame this challenge also. The challenge, he passed the Akedah, but is he going to trip on the way to the winner's circle? Is he going to say, to have a certain, not I wish I hadn't done it, but have a certain sense of misgiving. But look at the fallout. Look at the pain that was caused. Look what this led to. The years, the life of Sarah were 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. The years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died. Next verse, verse 2. She died in Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Vayavo Avraham, Avram came, lispod l'sara v'liv kota. We asked before to eulogize Sarah and to cry for her. Don't you first cry and then eulogize?
Not if it's her time.
If a person is able to completely accept that this was the time, then he could even first eulogize and then cry. Liv kota, the crying, the letter kaf there, for those seeing in the Hebrew, is a smaller letter. His crying was minimized because Avraham accepted fully that this was her time. And this is a difficult... Yes, Ruti.
So you shouldn't try really to find reasons why something happened. Maybe it's because her time came. So why is Rashi saying that it's because of the binding of Isaac?
So that's what the Netziv Shalom is saying. That so the time came. Why did the sages make this connection between the Akedah, the binding, right? Because that was sent as a challenge to Avraham. And that is a challenge that we face all the time when we are dealing with a death. When it's a drunken driver, right? And and it's right? God forbid, right? And tragically, a person healthy, fine, 1 minute, next minute, right? Life is over. That person did it. Now, that person must be held responsible, right? That person will be held responsible here on earth and in the heavens. But that is not what caused the death of that person. That person's time had come. And as difficult as that is to completely digest and integrate, that was this I won't say the final test, but that was the next stage of this test of Avraham. Debbie.
I was going to say, if Avraham, we can assume that Avraham understood that this is not the only world. That when Sarah goes, what are we supposed to do in Avelos? When a person goes,
Avelos is in a state of mourning after a death.
Yes, there's a basic prescribed setup, but we're supposed to remember the good that they did, talk about them incessantly during that week of Shiva, and then sit during the Shiva and bewail them and remember them, the combination of remembering and mourning, and then after the month and then after the year, we are supposed to move on because we know that in the future there's another world coming up.
Yeah. And one of the things that I discuss at every funeral is this idea that we have lost our relationship with that person.
Right, and that's what we're mourning.
But that person is not lost. That person has and is moving on. And that goes back to the Chaye Sarah. When a person has that view on life, we understand that this is a stage and it's not what we did or didn't do. We have to do everything we can to try to prolong a person's life, but understand that it's not, and never do something to shorten a person's life, but understand that it's not us who decides when the time is, and it's not even, it comes out that, that this is, hashkafically, from the perspective, it comes out, that means, what I'm saying is, when a crazy person walks in to a McDonald's with a submachine gun and mows down 10 people before he is stopped or subdued, right? And unfortunately, there's no shortage of these crazy tragedies happening on college campuses, in high schools, in Israel, throughout the world. Certainly the Middle East is a hotbed in Israel. To understand that there is nothing, from our point of view, there is nothing that is just random in the world. Now, you might ask, so 1 second, this gets confusing. So everyone has free will. So, Rabbi, you're telling me that the guy in McDonald's who killed 10 people, each of those 10 people happened to have been there at that time because their time had come. But the guy with the gun has free will, doesn't he? So he could have decided not to do it at any point. So you're telling me, Rabbi, that if he decided at the last minute not to do it, those 10 people would have simultaneously choked on their Big Macs? And they would have died? That sounds ridiculous. And it is ridiculous to say such a thing. But what we understand is there is this orchestration, this heavenly orchestration. And God knows exactly what a person, we're responsible for our actions. Full responsibility for our actions. There's no predeterminism. We are fully culpable, responsible for our actions, good and otherwise. But God knows ultimately what is going to be happening. That's the famous Bechira Yediyah, we're not going to go into, with our free will and God's knowledge. So therefore there is that meeting together of this person who is going to, heaven forbid, go through with this craziness, and those that need to be there. And Avraham was able to stand up to this, I won't say final test, but certainly one of to this addendum to the test. Leah and then Linda. Yeah.
So it can also go the other way in terms of like the crazy guy in McDonald's, a person who's the hero who saves someone. Maybe also that person's time was not up, and the person who saved the hero had an opportunity to do a mitzvah and then chose to do the mitzvah. But if they wouldn't have chosen to do the mitzvah, the person still would have survived, but it would have been a different way.
The gun, correct, the gun could jam, right? There are many ways, right? But we don't even need to come out to the gun jamming because there's this yediyah, this knowledge of who's going to be there, right? So it is this perfect orchestration where the end result is going to be exactly as destined by heaven. What role do I play? I choose the role that I am going to play. Right? What's going to happen will happen. I can be the hero. I can be the stinker. I decide what role I am playing in individual situations and in life. Linda.
What about the victim?
Mordecai said to Esther, if you don't go before the king, if you don't make this happen, someone else will make
Correct. Right. That's a good point. And when we get closer to Purim, we'll discuss that at length. Right. Mordecai is trying to get Esther to go before the king of Persia, right, to intercede on behalf of the Jews. Now, what do you think you would say to her? Right? We need you. You are our ace up the sleeve. You are the queen in the palace. We need you. Now's your time. This is what it's all about. What does Mordecai say to her? The opposite. Right? Listen, if you're going to, right, this is why you're in the palace. If you're going to duck out, so whatever's going to happen will happen through another means. You're not controlling the outcome. You are controlling your part. Right? You choose the casting. Right? But you don't control, that's exactly, beautiful point, that's exactly what he said. Yes, Stu.
So the poor victims of these crazy people that go in and shoot them, you think they made a choice to be there as a victim?
So the way, what we're understanding here, and again, I'm not saying this is easy, what we're understanding here is that from the Abraham God view, they were victims of that person's decision, but their life was meant to end at that point. Why? Why would God choose to have the person's life end in such a way? So, when it comes to why does God ... and that goes back to what we mentioned earlier today about the Akedah. Why does God ... And I mentioned a number of times. My brother told me about a call-in show in Baltimore. Right? If you were God, what would you change? And the typical answers are no more hunger, no more homelessness, no more disease, no more famine, no more war. And finally, someone called in and said, what would I change? Absolutely nothing. What do you mean, absolutely nothing? Well, if I'm believing in God, I'm believing that God knows, and God controls the world, so God knows all, and this is what He does. So if I were God and I knew all, the only logical conclusion is I would come to the same decision as He. But we are not God.
We think we're better. We think we know more.
Yeah, we are not God. That's why the Gemara says, the Talmud says, that someone who gets angry, it's like worshiping idolatry. Why is anger like idolatry? Well, at its root, anger is, this should not have happened like this. It should have happened not A, B, C, it should have been X, Y, Z. And if I were in control, I would have made sure that that didn't happen. Well, we could hear that is bordering on idolatry. Right? I know better.
So how do you explain Avraham say to God such hard thing like Chalila lecha?
Okay, good. Okay.
Shame
So
on you, God.
Dahlia is asking a great question. Earlier on, good. Earlier on, when God said about, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, Avraham gets in there. It doesn't say, hey, listen, you're God, you know. What can I bring to the table over here? Do whatever you want to do. That's a good question. The difference over there is that God said to Avraham, in this prophecy, God said to him, the cries of Sodom and Gomorrah are great. They've come before me. I'm going to have to decide what to do. Now, if God says to you, I'm going to decide what to do, what is God clearly inviting you to do?
That there's no decision.
Right. Enter the fray. And that is what we do with our prayer every day. Our prayer is entering the fray. We don't say, this person's sick. Oh God, you know what's best. I leave it up to you. We enter the fray and we beg and we plead and we advocate. We do everything that we can. And we take on a good mitzvah or a good deed to do on that. Whatever we can do, we do. King David had a son that was sick, and David was crying and fasting and this and that and this and that and this and that. And then when the child died, the people were afraid to tell David, because look what he's gone through. If he hears this, he'll go over the cliff. He sensed the child had died, and he hears, yes, the child died. He said, yes. He said, okay. And then he took off the sackcloth and had a meal. What do you mean? Well, as long as I thought that I could change the heavenly decree, I did anything and everything that I could to try to change the heavenly decree. That was the decree. I accept. The Akedah was a command. Go ahead and do it. That wasn't the time for Avraham to start arguing. That was the time for acceptance. The things that happen in life, those are the decrees. That's done. End of story. And then we accept that. We might not have hope for that, but we accept that there's a God that knows more than we, and we go on. Until that point, we're praying, we're saying Tehillim, we're saying Psalms, we're doing anything and everything that we can. We're involved medically to do everything that we can do, spiritually, emotionally, anything and everything we do. Leah and then Dov.
So we do, well, actually, it's a question. Do we must have the power to change the decree, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be praying. But, so do we?
Yes.
Yes.
But it's also by doing that, we're also changing ourselves. So then sometimes that decree was for this person, but now I changed who I am, and so then maybe that decree is not, I bettered myself, I davened, I did whatever it is, or people did that for you, so now things have changed, and then that decree is no longer the decree for who or what the existence that was. So we can change.
What Natalie is saying, there is this master plan that the decree is against this person. Now we draw concentric circles around that, right? These people will be affected really hard, right? Really hard. These somewhat, these a little bit, these minimally. God's judgment is such that all involved need to be involved to the degree that they are involved. So what tefillah can do is involve other people. And then that can sort of reshuffle the deck somewhat. Or sometimes the prayer, the situation was there in order for us to become uplifted. There's no atheist in a foxhole, right? In order for us to become uplifted and connect. That was the point of it, right? Later on, when Pharaoh is chasing the children of Israel after he left Egypt, so the verse says, "Uparo hikriv," and Paro, right? It doesn't say he hitkarev, that he came close. Hikriv means he drew others close. So simply he drew the other soldiers close. He led them, or the sages say hikriv, he brought us close. He caused us to pray. So we never know what is the real cause. We believe our prayers are always listened to, always have an effect, but we can't delude ourselves into thinking it'll always go the way that we hoped it would go.
Doesn't sin cause death?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't sin cause death?
Not always.
If you go
Again, this is going
in the beginning, it's sin cause death.
in the very beginning, right? How it works for each person, that is really out of our realm.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What is this? Is there any significance in 30 days after the funeral? Is
Okay.
there any?
Okay, so in the Jewish mourning practices, we have 7 days, we have 30 days, we have 12 months. And the idea is that these different stages mirror the movement of the soul leaving this physical temporal world and going and entering the spiritual realm. And that these stages that we go through down here, they mirror and represent those.
So 30 days means, where is the soul after 30 days?
Rabbi,
Yes.
what is Shnei Chayei Sarah?
Shnei, milashon shanim. Milashon shanim. Shnei. Shnei chayim. Lo shnayim. Shnei chayei Sarah. Okay. Yes, Lupe.
Rabbi, this is like when before Rosh Hashanah we do prayers and prayers to minimize para minimizar el decreto divino, ¿no?
To minimize the divine decree.
Sí.
Yeah. By Rosh Hashanah, by the Jewish New Year, and at all times, right? Prayer is a daily thing, right? You know, prayer is daily. But the lesson of this Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, is that life is one stage is our physical life. This is a small part of the overall picture. And the time that it comes to an end, that is something that is out of our realm. Someone wrote to me, and we'll end with this, I don't want to go too late. Someone said, Rabbi, why is it that if a horse is in pain, right, if your dog is in pain, we'll have the kindness and the compassion to put it down, which is how we say, with the term that we use to make ourselves feel a little bit better, right? And that's an act of kindness. So why wouldn't we do that same act of kindness to a human being who is suffering, right? And we just had Governor Brown signing, the physician-assisted suicide. Why isn't that an act of compassion? And I think what the answer is that an animal lives a physical life. right? But a human being has a soul.
But we're saying that anything is soul.
There is,
You can't say
well,
even
no.
a soul.
An animal has a living spirit, doesn't have a soul, which a soul is a separate component that lives on afterwards.
And not
Right?
understanding of
And if we're not the ones who can grant this life, this eternal life, this soul, then we're not the ones to squelch. Yeah.
Okay, you brought it up, so, but what just popped in my mind is that, like, the connection between tzaddikim and fish. So that, okay, it must be a Hasidic thing, that sometimes, in Gilgul, that.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna go there yet.
Yeah,
Okay, I won't go there, we'll talk about it privately.
Yeah.
If you're done, can I add one more thing that I've always loved about this part?
Yeah.
You done?
Yeah.
Okay, public, okay. So there's the Akeda test, and then you talked about the test of not making it to the winner's circle by feeling regret about what he had just done. So another test that was pointed out to me is that Avraham had such self-discipline of the way that he behaved with others, that he was responsible for the way he dealt with
B'nai Chet.
B'nai Chet. Chet, like sin?
What is
Chet?
that?
No, spelled differently.
Okay, Chet. Okay. So imagine, if I had had the day that he'd had, I almost killed my son, I come back and my wife has died, and now you're jerking me around like this, you know,
He's trying to buy the tome of the patriarchs, right? And they're handling with him, they're bargaining with him, right? They're jerking him around.
And
Yeah.
so,
But they're nice to
in
him.
my human being, they're only like, it's sugar, saccharin, it's sweet, nice, it's, okay. So, you know, on my worst days, after having a day like that, I would probably be screaming at this man.
Yeah,
And
strangling
telling him everything that I think, and calling him who knows how many names, and he didn't.
Yeah.
Because he is aware that how he behaves in this world is not a result of anybody else's actions or anything.
And you
It's
wouldn't
who
have
he chooses to be in
Yeah.
this world.
And you
Yeah.
wouldn't have screamed if it was your boss and your job depended on it.
Yeah.
You would have controlled yourself.
You
If
can't
he
control yourself.
screamed-
Good.
If he screamed, he wouldn't have gotten that grade.
Good.
So
Yeah. And but just take that. So the big test was the Akedah, which was the binding of Isaac, which was this intense spiritual. But then it all matters on how do I treat my neighbor, how do I deal with the person, right? Do I say I'm on this high level and I've been through this and therefore I'm going to step on you, or do I recognize that how I deal with every person must always be exemplary?
That's right here.
Okay. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna go just back. When the person dies being shot in McDonald's, or the person dies in a car crash, is that a punishment for the life they lived?
No.
Or is
No.
it entrance
No.
into the new
No.
world?
That's their time to go to the next stage.
But I meant
Why,
as a
and again,
person-
why in such a way? Look, is that more suffering than being sick with a disease for 2-3 years?
Can't we say that they've finished what they had to do on this
Yes.
planet
Yeah.
here?
Time has
And
come.
it's time to
No,
move
but
on.
the way